She walked away from billionaire husband. Now he's desperate for her forbidden touch to save his dying daughter. Dr. Daphne Moore's hands trembled as she stared at the medical chart. Amy Thorne, 8 years old, critical heart defect requiring immediate surgery. The little girl she'd raised as her own daughter for 3 precious years before the divorce tore them apart. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his face pale with desperation, the same man who'd chosen his empire over their family 5 years ago. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're the only surgeon who can save her. Save us both." The chart slipped from Daphne's fingers, clattering to the floor of her office at Children's Memorial Hospital. Amy Thorne. Even reading the name felt like a physical blow to her chest. 8 years old now. The last time she'd seen her was 3 years old, crying as Gabriel's lawyers escorted Daphne out of what had been their family home. Gabriel stepped fully into her office, and Daphne's breath caught at the sight of him. 5 years had refined his sharp features, adding distinguished silver to his dark hair at the temples. His gray eyes still held that intensity that had first drawn her to him during medical school, when he'd been a brilliant business student volunteering at the children's clinic. But now those eyes held a desperation she'd never seen before. "Daphne." His voice was rougher than she remembered, weighted with exhaustion and fear. "Thank you for seeing me." She forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady. "I shouldn't have agreed to this meeting." Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, professional, distant, nothing like the woman who used to whisper his name in the darkness of their bedroom. "Amy is dying." The words hit her like a physical blow. Daphne sank back into her chair, her medical training warring with the maternal love that had never died. "Tell me about her condition." Gabriel moved closer, pulling out a thick folder of medical records. As he placed it on her desk, his fingers brushed hers. The contact was brief, electric, sending shock waves up her arm that she prayed he couldn't see. His touch still affected her after all these years, after all the pain. "Hypoplastic left heart syndrome with multiple complications," he said, his business voice cracking slightly. "She's had 3 surgeries already, but this time—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she remembered from their marriage. "The other surgeons, they all said the same thing. Too risky, too complex. But you're the best pediatric cardiac surgeon on the East Coast." Daphne opened the file, her heart breaking as she saw Amy's tiny face in the medical photos. Still beautiful, still Gabriel's daughter in every feature, but so much frailer than the vibrant 3-year-old she remembered. The little girl who used to climb into her lap every morning, who called her Mommy Daph because she couldn't pronounce Daphne properly. "Why, didn't you bring her to me sooner?" The question escaped before she could stop it, tinged with the pain of 5 years of separation. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "I tried. After the second surgery failed, I called. Your assistant said you weren't taking new patients." "I wasn't taking Thorne patients," Daphne corrected quietly. "There's a difference." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken hurt. Gabriel moved to the window, staring out at the city skyline he'd helped build with his technology empire. "I know I have no right to ask this of you. I know what I put you through, what I cost us both. But Amy... His voice broke completely. "She's innocent in all this. She doesn't deserve to pay for my mistakes." Daphne studied Amy's latest cardiac images, her trained eye immediately recognizing the complexity of the case. Multiple previous surgeries had created scar tissue. The anatomy was distorted. The risks were enormous. Any other surgeon would be right to refuse. But this wasn't any other child. This was Amy. "She still asks about you," Gabriel said softly, still facing the window. "Even now, when she's so sick, she asks why Mommy Daph can't come visit anymore." The admission shattered something in Daphne's chest. She closed her eyes, remembering Amy's laugh, the way she'd curl up between Gabriel and her for story time, how she'd insisted on helping cook dinner, even though she mostly just made messes. "The marriage was failing long before the divorce," Daphne said quietly. "But Amy was never part of that failure. She was the best part of us." Gabriel turned, his gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "She still is. Please, Daphne, I'll do anything. Pay anything. Sign anything. Just don't let her pay for what I destroyed between us." Before Daphne could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Patricia Coleman, her mentor and the head of pediatric cardiology, peered around the door. "Daphne, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the PICU." "Actually, Dr. Coleman," Gabriel stepped forward, extending his hand. "Gabriel Thorne, I believe you know why I'm here." Patricia's expression tightened. She'd been Daphne's shoulder to cry on during the divorce, had witnessed firsthand how Gabriel's emotional abandonment had nearly destroyed her protégé. "Mr. Thorne," Patricia said coolly, "I trust this meeting is purely professional." "It is," Daphne said quickly, though her hammering heart suggested otherwise. "I was just reviewing Amy's case." Patricia's knowing look suggested she wasn't fooled, but she nodded. "Of course. The Hamilton case in PICU can wait a few more minutes." After Patricia left, Gabriel stepped closer to Daphne's desk. "Will you at least consider it? Will you examine her?" Daphne looked at Amy's photo again, at those bright eyes so much like Gabriel's, at the trust that had never wavered despite everything that had happened. Her professional instincts warred with her broken heart, but there was really no choice. "I'll need to do a full cardiac catheterization," she said finally. "New imaging, complete workup. If I'm going to attempt this surgery, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." The relief that flooded Gabriel's face was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," he whispered. "I know this costs you." "This isn't about us," Daphne interrupted, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "This is about Amy. When can you bring her in?" "She's already here. She's been here for 3 days, waiting." Have you ever faced an impossible choice between your heart and your head? Tell me your story in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if Amy's situation is already pulling at your heartstrings. The pediatric intensive care unit felt different when you were walking toward a child who used to be yours. Daphne's hands were steady as she approached Amy's room, but her heart was racing like she was about to perform the most complex surgery of her career. Through the glass door, she could see Amy propped up in bed, small and pale against the white hospital linens. Monitors beeped softly, tracking the heart that wasn't working properly, the heart that Daphne was being asked to repair. Gabriel's hand hovered near the small of her back, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "She's been asking for you since I told her you might be able to help," he said quietly. Daphne pushed open the door, and Amy's head turned toward them. For a moment, time stopped. Those bright gray eyes, so much like her father's, widened with recognition and something that looked like hope. "Mommy, Daph?" Amy's voice was weaker than Daphne remembered, but the love in it was unmistakable. "Hello, sweetheart," Daphne managed, moving to Amy's bedside. The little girl looked so small connected to all the medical equipment, but her smile was radiant. "Daddy said you might be able to fix my heart," Amy said, reaching out with one small hand. "Are you really a heart doctor now?" Daphne took Amy's hand gently, careful of the IV lines. "I am, and I want to take a look at that heart of yours, if that's okay with you." Amy nodded eagerly, then looked between Gabriel and Daphne with curiosity that was far too mature for her 8 years. "Daddy, why did Mommy Daph stop coming to see us?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Gabriel's jaw tightened, and Daphne felt her chest constrict. How do you explain divorce and abandonment to a child who only remembers love? "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Daphne said carefully, stroking Amy's hair. "But that doesn't mean the love goes away." "I knew it," Amy said with satisfaction. "I told Daddy you still loved us. He said maybe, but I knew for sure." Gabriel cleared his throat roughly, moving to the other side of Amy's bed. As he did, he passed close to Daphne, and she caught the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something new. Fear, exhaustion, desperation. The combination made her dizzy with memories of better times and painful awareness of everything they'd lost. "Amy, I need to listen to your heart," Daphne said, pulling out her stethoscope. "Can you be very still for me?" As Daphne leaned over to position the stethoscope, Amy whispered conspiratorially, "Daddy missed you a lot. He keeps a picture of all of us from Christmas morning on his desk at work." Daphne's hand stilled for a moment before she placed the stethoscope on Amy's chest. The heart sounds were exactly what she'd expected from the chart. Irregular, strained, fighting against anatomy that wasn't designed to sustain life much longer. But as she listened, she became aware of Gabriel watching her intently. When she looked up, their eyes met across Amy's bed, and she saw something in his gaze that made her breath catch. The same look he used to give her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, full of wonder and love and something that looked like worship. "How does it sound?" Amy asked anxiously. "Like a heart that's been working very hard," Daphne said honestly, "but I think we can help it work easier." "Will it hurt?" Daphne sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle any of the monitors. "Surgery always involves some discomfort, sweetheart, but I promise we'll take very good care of you." Amy considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, I trust you, Mommy Daph." The simple faith in those words nearly undid Daphne completely. She glanced at Gabriel and saw her own emotion reflected in his face. Hope, terror, and love all tangled together. "I need to run some tests," Daphne said, standing. "We'll need to do some special pictures of your heart to make sure I understand exactly how to help you." "Will you stay with me?" Amy asked, looking between both adults. "Of course," Gabriel said immediately. "Both of you?" Amy pressed. "Like before?" The question created a charged silence. Gabriel and Daphne hadn't been in the same room for longer than this medical consultation in 5 years. The idea of spending hours together while Amy underwent tests seemed both necessary and dangerous. "If that's what you need," Daphne said finally, her professional responsibilities overriding her personal concerns. As they arranged for Amy's cardiac catheterization, Gabriel's hand brushed against Daphne's as they both reached for Amy's chart. The contact was brief but electric, sending awareness shooting through her entire body. She jerked her hand back as if burned, but not before she saw Gabriel's pupils dilate with recognition of the same attraction that had never died between them. Dr. Moore, Sophia Morgan, her resident, appeared in the doorway. "The cath lab is ready for your patient." As they prepared to move Amy, she insisted on holding both Gabriel's and Daphne's hands. "Like a family again," she said contentedly, unaware of the tension her innocent words created between the adults. Walking down the hospital corridor with Amy. Between them, Daphne was struck by how natural it felt despite everything. They'd done this before, hospital visits for Amy's previous surgeries, both of them united in their love for this child, even when their marriage was crumbling around them. Gabriel squeezed Amy's hand. "You're going to be so brave, Princess." "I'm not scared," Amy said confidently. "Mommy Daph is the best heart doctor in the whole world. Daddy told me so." Daphne glanced at Gabriel in surprise. He'd been praising her to Amy all these years, even after their bitter divorce. "She is," Gabriel said quietly, his eyes meeting Daphne's across Amy's head. "The very best." The sincerity in his voice, the way he looked at her with complete trust and something deeper, made Daphne's steps falter. This was the Gabriel she'd fallen in love with, the man who believed in her completely, who supported her dreams even when he struggled with his own demons. In the pre-procedure area, Amy grew more anxious as the reality of the testing set in. She clung to both Gabriel and Daphne, needing the security of having both her parents present. "Will you sing to me?" Amy asked Daphne as the sedation began to take effect. "The song you used to sing at bedtime?" Daphne's throat tightened. She'd forgotten that Amy would remember their bedtime ritual. "What song is that, sweetheart?" "The one about being safe and loved," Amy mumbled, her eyelids growing heavy. Daphne began to hum softly, a lullaby she'd made up years ago, just for Amy. As she sang, she noticed Gabriel watching her with an expression of such tenderness and pain that she almost stopped. But Amy's peaceful breathing told her the song was working, helping the little girl drift into sedated sleep. As Amy was wheeled into the procedure room, Gabriel caught Daphne's arm. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for all of this. I know it can't be easy." His touch burned through the sleeve of her lab coat, reminding her of all the times he'd touched her in comfort, in passion, in love. She pulled away quickly, but not before she felt him tremble slightly. "It's my job," she said, but they both knew it was much more than that. The cardiac catheterization took 2 hours. 2 hours of Gabriel and Daphne sitting in the family waiting area, hyper-aware of each other's presence. Gabriel paced, his nervous energy filling the small space. Daphne tried to focus on other patient files, but found herself watching Gabriel instead. He'd changed in 5 years, she realized, still devastatingly handsome, but there were new lines around his eyes, a weariness that hadn't been there before. His hair was longer than he used to wear it, and she wondered absently if he still used the same barber or if that was another casualty of their divorce. "Stop staring at me," Gabriel said without turning around. "I wasn't staring," Daphne protested, then realized how defensive she sounded. Gabriel turned, and she saw a ghost of his old smile. "You were. You always stared when you were thinking too hard about something." "Maybe I was thinking about Amy's procedure." "Maybe," Gabriel agreed, but his tone suggested he didn't believe her any more than she believed herself. He sat down across from her, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, close enough to notice that he still wore their wedding ring on a chain around his neck, visible just above his shirt collar. "You kept it," she said before she could stop herself. Gabriel's hand went instinctively to his throat. "I never took it off, even when the lawyer said I should." The admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to address. Daphne looked down at her own hands, bare of rings for 5 years now. She'd put her wedding set in a safety deposit box the day the divorce was finalized, unable to wear them but equally unable to throw them away. "Dr. Moore?" Sophia appeared with Amy's test results. "The catheterization is complete. Everything went smoothly." As Daphne reviewed Amy's images with Sophia, she was aware of Gabriel standing close behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. When she pointed to a particular area of concern, he leaned forward to see better, his chest nearly brushing her back. The proximity was intoxicating and dangerous. Her body remembered his with devastating clarity, the way he felt pressed against her, the way his hands had once mapped every inch of her skin, the way he used to hold her after they'd made love like she was something precious he was afraid to lose. "The anatomy is even more complex than I thought," she murmured, trying to focus on the medical images instead of the man behind her. "But you can fix it?" Gabriel asked, his breath warm against her ear. "I can try," Daphne said, stepping away before she did something foolish like lean back into his warmth. As Amy woke up from the sedation, she reached for both of them immediately. "Did you fix my heart yet?" "Not yet, sweetheart," Daphne said, smoothing Amy's hair. "But now I know exactly what needs to be done." Amy studied both their faces seriously. "Are you going to take care of each other while you take care of me?" The question was so innocent, so hopeful, that both adults were struck silent. How do you explain to a child that taking care of each other was exactly what they'd failed to do before? "We're going to take very good care of you," Gabriel said finally. "That's what matters." But Amy's knowing look suggested she wasn't satisfied with that answer. "Daddy, remember what you told me about second chances?" Gabriel's face went pale. "Amy, sweetheart. You said sometimes people get second chances to do things better," Amy continued with the relentless logic of a child. "Maybe this is your second chance." The weight of Amy's words settled over them both. A second chance. The possibility hung in the air between them, terrifying and tempting in equal measure. As they prepared to move, Amy back to her room, Daphne found herself walking beside Gabriel again, their steps naturally synchronizing the way they always had. It was muscle memory, she told herself, nothing more. But when Gabriel's hand brushed hers as they both reached to adjust Amy's blanket, the spark of awareness that passed between them suggested that some things never truly died, no matter how much pain had tried to bury them. Chapter 2. That evening, as Amy slept peacefully in her hospital bed, Gabriel and Daphne found themselves alone in the hallway outside her room. The pediatric ward was quieter at night, with only the soft beeping of monitors and the distant murmur of nursing staff. "I should go home," Daphne said, though she made no move to leave. "Get some rest before we plan the surgery." Gabriel nodded but didn't step away from where he stood close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched in his features. The penthouse is only 10 minutes from here. You could... He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind, that was inappropriate. But Daphne had heard what he almost said. The penthouse, their old home, the place where they'd been happy, where Amy had taken her first steps, where their marriage had slowly unraveled under the weight of Gabriel's emotional walls and her own growing loneliness. "Is that where Amy lives now?" she asked quietly. "When she's not in the hospital," Gabriel said. "I kept her room exactly the same. She said Mommy Daph might come back someday and want to see her toys." The admission hit Daphne like a physical blow. Amy had kept hope alive all these years while the adults had given up on their broken family. "Gabriel," she started, then stopped. What could she possibly say? That she'd thought about him every day for 5 years? That she'd driven past the building dozens of times but never had the courage to go up? That leaving Amy had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder even than leaving him? "I know," he said quietly. "I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you except what's best for Amy medically. But she's so happy having you here. I haven't seen her smile like that since..." He trailed off, but they both knew. Since before the divorce. A nurse walked by, nodding professionally at Daphne. The interruption broke the spell of intimacy that had been building between them. "I should review her surgical options tonight," Daphne said, stepping back. "I'll need at least 3 days to prepare." "Whatever you need," Gabriel said immediately. "Time, equipment, surgical team, anything." As Daphne started to walk away, Gabriel called her name softly. When she turned back, he was looking at her with an expression she remembered from their early days together. Vulnerable, hopeful, afraid to want too much. "Thank you," he said, "for giving her this chance. For giving her this chance." The correction wasn't lost on Daphne, but neither was the original word choice. United States. As if somewhere in his mind, they were still a family unit worth saving. The next morning brought a complication that changed everything. Daphne arrived at the hospital to find Amy's room in chaos, alarms beeping, nurses rushing in and out, Gabriel standing pressed against the wall looking devastated. "What happened?" Daphne demanded, pushing past everyone to get to Amy's bedside. "She went into atrial fibrillation around 4 a.m., Dr. Villa," Patricia Coleman reported, her face grim. "We've got her stabilized now, but her heart is failing faster than we anticipated." Daphne looked at Amy's monitors, her trained eye immediately recognizing the crisis. "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe a week if we're lucky," Patricia said quietly. Gabriel made a sound like he'd been punched. Daphne glanced at him and saw that he was barely holding himself together, his usual corporate control completely shattered. "Then we operate tomorrow," Daphne said firmly. "Daphne, the risks," Patricia started, "are outweighed by the certainty of what happens if we don't," Daphne finished. "I need to call in my surgical team. Can you clear OR7 for tomorrow morning?" As Patricia left to make arrangements, Gabriel approached Amy's bedside. His daughter looked so small against the hospital equipment, her breathing shallow, her color pale. "Hey, princess," he said softly, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" Amy's eyes fluttered open. "Tired, Daddy. Is Mommy Daph here?" "I'm here, sweetheart," Daphne said, moving to the other side of the bed. As she did, her shoulder brushed Gabriel's arm, and she felt him tremble slightly. "Are you going to fix my heart today?" Amy asked hopefully. "Tomorrow morning," Daphne said. "But tonight, I want you to rest and get stronger." Amy nodded, then looked between both adults with that too-wise expression that broke their hearts. "Will you both stay with me tonight, in case I get scared?" Gabriel started to protest that one of them should go home and rest, but Daphne cut him off. "Of course we will. We'll be right here." As Amy drifted back to sleep, Gabriel and Daphne found themselves settling into chairs on either side of her bed for what could be their last night as Amy's parents. The thought hung unspoken between them, too terrible to voice but impossible to ignore. Around midnight, as Amy slept peacefully between them, Gabriel spoke quietly. "I need you to know something. If tomorrow doesn't..." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "I need you to know that marrying you, having you love Amy like she was your own, those were the best years of my life." Daphne's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for hours. "Gabriel, don't—" "I destroyed it," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I destroyed the most beautiful thing I'd ever been part of because I was too scared to believe it could last. Because everyone I'd ever loved had left me, and I thought if I pushed you away first, it wouldn't hurt as much." "But it did hurt," Daphne whispered. "It hurt all of us." Gabriel nodded, reaching across Amy's sleeping form to touch Daphne's hand. The contact was gentle, desperate, full of 5 years' worth of unspoken regret. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Daphne. For all of it." Before Daphne could respond, Amy stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like, "Mommy Daph." Both adults froze, afraid to wake her, but also moved by the trust in her sleeping voice. Gabriel's thumb stroked across Daphne's knuckles, and she didn't pull away. For this one night, with Amy between them and an uncertain tomorrow ahead, they let themselves remember what it felt like to be a family. "I need to prepare for surgery," Daphne said finally, though she made no move to pull her hand away from Gabriel's. "I know," he said, but his fingers tightened around hers. "Daphne, whatever happens tomorrow—" "We're going to save her," Daphne said firmly. "That's what's going to happen." But they both knew that even the best surgeon in the world couldn't guarantee a miracle, and they both knew that if they lost Amy, they'd lose the only connection they had left to each other. The pre-dawn hours brought a flurry of surgical preparation. Daphne's team assembled, reviewing Amy's case with the intensity it deserved. Gabriel paced the family waiting area, unable to sit still, his nervous energy filling the space. When Dr. Michael Lee arrived to observe the surgery, Gabriel's entire body went rigid with an emotion he didn't want to examine too closely. Michael was tall, handsome, clearly interested in Daphne beyond just professional collaboration. The way he smiled at her, the way he touched her shoulder when discussing the surgical plan, Gabriel recognized the signs of a man pursuing a woman he cared about. "Who is that?" Gabriel asked Sophia Morgan when she came to update him on Amy's pre-surgical preparation. Sophia glanced toward where Daphne and Michael were reviewing heart charts together. "Dr. Lee. He's been trying to ask Dr. Moore out for months." The information hit Gabriel like a punch to the chest. Of course Daphne had moved on. Of course there were other men interested in her. She was brilliant, beautiful, compassionate, everything any man would want. But the thought of her with someone else, especially while Amy was fighting for her life, was unbearable. When Michael leaned close to whisper something in Daphne's ear that made her smile, Gabriel had to grip the arms of his chair to keep from standing up and doing something regrettable. "Jealous much?" Jeremy Evans's voice came from behind him. Gabriel turned to find his business partner and former best friend approaching with coffee and a knowing expression. "What are you doing here?" Gabriel asked tersely. "Amy is like a niece to me," Jeremy said, settling into the chair next to Gabriel. "Despite everything that happened between us, I care about that little girl." Gabriel accepted the coffee but didn't respond to the underlying message. Jeremy had been the one to encourage the divorce, to convince Gabriel that Daphne was holding him back from business success. It was advice that had cost Gabriel everything that mattered. "She looks good," Jeremy observed, nodding toward where Daphne was explaining something to her surgical team. "Happy, confident." "She's about to perform the most complex surgery of her career," Gabriel said. "Of course she's confident." "I meant happy in general," Jeremy clarified. "Like she's found her place in the world without needing anyone else to complete her." The observation stung because Gabriel could see that it was true. Daphne had built a life without him, had found fulfillment in her career and independence. While he'd been drowning in regret and loneliness, she'd been thriving. "You made a mistake," Jeremy said quietly. "I made a mistake encouraging you to push her away. We were both idiots." Before Gabriel could respond, Amy was being wheeled toward the operating rooms. She was awake, looking small and brave in her surgical gown. "Daddy," she called, and Gabriel immediately moved to her gurney's side. "I'm here, princess." "Is Mommy Daph ready to fix my heart?" "She's very ready," Gabriel assured her, walking alongside the gurney as they moved toward the OR. Daphne appeared on Amy's other side, having changed into her surgical scrubs. She looked professional, competent, every inch the renowned surgeon she'd become. but Gabriel could see the emotion in her eyes as she looked down at Amy. "I'm going to take very good care of you," Daphne promised, leaning down to kiss Amy's forehead. "And when you wake up, your heart is going to work so much better." "Will you both be there when I wake up?" Amy asked, looking between them with hope that nearly destroyed Gabriel. "We'll both be there," Daphne said firmly, her eyes meeting Gabriel's across Amy's small body. "I promise." As they reached the doors to the surgical suite, Amy grabbed both their hands. "I love you both so much," she said with 8-year-old sincerity, "more than all the stars in the sky." Gabriel's composure finally cracked completely. Tears he'd been holding back for hours spilled over as he squeezed Amy's hand. "We love you too, Princess, more than you'll ever know." The anesthesiologist began to administer the sedation, and Amy's eyelids grew heavy. "Tell Mommy Daff I want her to stay forever this time," she mumbled as sleep claimed her. The innocent words hit both adults like lightning. Amy's deepest wish, spoken in the vulnerability of surgical sedation, was for them to be a family again. As Amy disappeared behind the surgical doors, Gabriel and Daphne stood alone in the hallway, both shattered by Amy's words and terrified by the hours ahead. "She wants you to stay forever," Gabriel said quietly. "She's 8 years old," Daphne replied, but her voice was shaky. "She doesn't understand how complicated things are between us." Gabriel turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. What if they don't have to be complicated? What if Amy's right about second chances? Before Daphne could answer, Dr. Patricia Coleman appeared. "Daphne, we need you in OR prep." As Daphne walked away to prepare for the surgery that would determine Amy's future, Gabriel was left with the terrifying realization that his daughter's life wasn't the only thing hanging in the balance. Somewhere in the space between Amy's crisis and their forced reunion, he'd begun to hope for something he thought he'd lost forever, a chance to fix what he'd broken, to be the man Daphne and Amy deserved. But first, Amy had to survive. And as Gabriel settled in for the longest wait of his life, he found himself praying not just for Amy's healing, but for the wisdom to know what to do if they were blessed with the miracle of more time together. Surgery scenes always terrify me, because you know how much the characters have to lose. Have you ever waited while someone you love was in surgery? Share your experience in the comments and let me know if you're holding your breath like I am. The surgery lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of Gabriel pacing the family waiting room, of Jeremy bringing food he couldn't eat, of Paige Thorne arriving with accusations and blame that Gabriel was too exhausted to fight. "This is what happens when you let that woman back into our lives," Paige said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Amy was stable until she showed up." "Mother, please," Gabriel said wearily, "not now." "She abandoned this family once," Paige continued relentlessly. "What makes you think she won't do it again?" Gabriel's temper, held in check by exhaustion and fear, finally snapped. "She didn't abandon us. I drove her away. I was so afraid of being left that I destroyed everything good we had before she could leave me first." Paige fell silent, shocked by Gabriel's admission. In 5 years, he'd never spoken openly about what had really happened in his marriage. "Amy loves her," Gabriel continued more quietly. "And Daphne loves Amy. That little girl in there is fighting for her life, and the woman who's trying to save her is the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in the country. If anyone can bring Amy back to us, it's Daphne." Before Paige could respond, Sophia Morgan appeared in the doorway, still in surgical scrubs. "How is she?" Gabriel asked immediately, his heart pounding. "The surgery was successful," Sophia said, and Gabriel felt his legs nearly give out with relief. "Dr. Moore was incredible. I've never seen anyone work with such precision under that kind of pressure." "Can I see Amy?" "She's in recovery now. It'll be a few hours before she wakes up, but her heart is working beautifully." Gabriel sank into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. Amy was going to be okay. His little girl was going to live. "Where's Daphne?" he asked, suddenly needing to see her, to thank her, to hold her if she'd let him. "She's still in the OR finishing up," Sophia said, "but she asked me to tell you that Amy did beautifully. She fought like a warrior." Gabriel nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm him completely. Amy was safe. His daughter was going to be okay because of Daphne's skill and dedication. When Daphne finally emerged from surgery 2 hours later, Gabriel was waiting outside the OR doors. She looked exhausted, her surgical scrubs wrinkled, her hair escaping from its cap, but her eyes were bright with triumph. "She's okay?" Gabriel asked, though he already knew the answer. "She's more than okay," Daphne said, pulling off her surgical cap. "Her heart is working better than it has in years. She's going to live, Gabriel. She's going to have a normal, healthy life." The relief was so overwhelming that Gabriel couldn't speak. He just stood there, staring at this incredible woman who had literally saved his daughter's life, saved his world, saved everything that mattered to him. "Thank you," he finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Daphne, But words weren't enough. Without thinking, Gabriel stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. For a moment she stiffened in surprise, but then she melted into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his waist. They held each other in the hallway outside the OR, both shaking with relief and exhaustion and something deeper. Gabriel buried his face in her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with hospital antiseptic. She felt so right in his arms, like coming home after years of being lost. "I thought I'd lost her," Gabriel whispered against her hair. "I thought I'd lost both of you forever." Daphne pulled back to look at him, and Gabriel saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's safe," she said softly. "Our little girl is safe. Our little girl." The words hung between them, acknowledging what had always been true, that biology meant nothing compared to love, that Daphne was Amy's mother in every way that mattered. Gabriel reached up to wipe the tears from Daphne's cheeks, his thumb tracing the familiar curve of her face. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't need to thank me," Daphne replied, but she didn't step away from his touch. "I would do anything for Amy. You know that." "I do know that," Gabriel said softly. "It's one of the things I've always loved about you." The word hung between them. Loved, not love. Past tense, safer, but they both knew it wasn't entirely accurate. Before either could say more, Dr. Patricia Coleman cleared her throat behind them. Gabriel and Daphne stepped apart quickly, both suddenly aware of how intimate their embrace had looked. "Amy is awake and asking for both of you," Patricia said with a knowing smile. Amy's recovery room was filled with flowers and balloons, gifts from Gabriel's business associates and friends who'd been following her condition. But Amy only had eyes for Gabriel and Daphne as they entered together. "Mommy Daph!" Amy called weakly, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube but filled with joy. "Daddy said you fixed my heart." "I did," Daphne said, moving to Amy's bedside. "How do you feel, sweetheart?" "Different," Amy said thoughtfully. "Like my chest doesn't hurt anymore, like I can breathe all the way to the bottom." Gabriel took Amy's other hand, marveling at the color already returning to her cheeks. "Dr. Daphne is the best heart surgeon in the whole world," he said, his eyes finding Daphne's across the bed. "I know," Amy said matter-of-factly. "That's why I wasn't scared. I knew Mommy Daph would take care of me." The simple trust in Amy's words nearly undid both adults. This child had faced life-threatening surgery with complete faith because she knew Daphne loved her. "I'm going to take very good care of you while you recover too," Daphne promised. "I'll be checking on you every day." Amy's face lit up. "Every day? For how long?" "For as long as it takes," Daphne said, not looking at Gabriel, but feeling his intense gaze on her. Over the next 3 days, as Amy's recovery progressed beautifully, Gabriel and Daphne found themselves spending more and more time together. At first, it was purely about Amy, discussing her care, monitoring her progress, making sure she had everything she needed. But gradually, other conversations crept in. Memories of happier times, shared laughter over Amy's precocious observations, quiet moments that felt dangerously like the intimacy they'd once shared. On the 3rd day, Amy was moved to a regular room, and Dr. Patricia Coleman declared her recovery ahead of schedule. Gabriel was in Amy's room reading her a story when Daphne arrived for evening rounds. "How's our patient?" she asked, and Gabriel noticed she'd said "our" again without seeming to realize it. "Much better," Gabriel said, closing the book. "She ate all her dinner, and she's been asking when she can go home. Soon, Daphne promised Amy, maybe by the weekend if you keep recovering this well. Amy looked between both adults with that serious expression they'd come to know well. Will Mommy Daph come home with us? The question created immediate tension. Gabriel's jaw tightened, and Daphne looked uncomfortable. Sweetheart, Daphne said carefully, I have my own home. But I'll visit you lots while you're getting better. But why can't you live with us like before? Amy persisted with 8-year-old logic. You love me, and Daddy loves you, and I love both of you. That's how families work. Gabriel stood abruptly, moving to the window. Amy, things are more complicated than that. Why? Amy asked, genuinely confused. You said people make mistakes, but love doesn't go away. So if you both made mistakes, but you still love each other, why can't you just say sorry and be a family again? The innocent question hit both adults like a physical blow. From a child's perspective, it really was that simple. Love plus forgiveness equaled family. Why were adults so determined to make things complicated? Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out, Daphne said gently, but Amy wasn't satisfied. How much time? Amy pressed. I've been waiting 3 years for you to come home, Mommy Daph. I'm tired of waiting. Before either adult could respond, Amy yawned, the conversation having exhausted her healing body. Gabriel moved back to tuck her in while Daphne adjusted her monitors. As Amy drifted off to sleep, she mumbled, I dreamed we were all together again. It was the best dream ever. Gabriel and Daphne stood on either side of Amy's bed, both shaken by her innocent honesty. In the soft glow of the hospital room lights, with Amy sleeping peacefully between them, they looked like the family they'd once been. She has a point, Gabriel said quietly, about love not going away. Daphne's breath caught. Gabriel, I never stopped loving you, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Even when I was pushing you away, even when I was too proud to fight for us, I never stopped. Tears filled Daphne's eyes. That doesn't fix what happened. It doesn't change the fact that you chose your work over our family every single time. You're right, Gabriel admitted. I was a coward. I was so afraid of being abandoned that I abandoned you first. But losing you, losing Amy, it taught me what really matters. Nothing I've built, none of the success, none of it means anything without the people I love. Daphne looked down at Amy's sleeping face, so peaceful now that her heart was working properly. She's been through enough trauma. I won't risk putting her through another broken family. What if it doesn't have to be broken this time? Gabriel asked, moving around the bed until he was standing close to her. What if we could do it right this time? Before Daphne could answer, Amy stirred in her sleep, reaching out with both hands as if looking for them. Instinctively, both Gabriel and Daphne stepped closer, each taking one of Amy's hands. Amy smiled in her sleep, settling peacefully now that she was connected to both her parents. Standing there in the quiet hospital room, holding Amy between them, Gabriel and Daphne both felt it, the pull of what they'd once been, the possibility of what they could be again. But possibility wasn't the same as certainty, and both of them carried too many scars to trust in happy endings. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Dr. Michael Lee appeared in Amy's room with flowers and an invitation that made Gabriel's blood pressure spike. Daphne, Michael said with a warm smile, I was hoping you'd join me for dinner tonight, to celebrate Amy's successful surgery. Gabriel watched Daphne's reaction carefully, noting the way she glanced at him before answering. That's very kind, Michael, but I should stay close to the hospital in case Amy needs anything. The weekend, then? Michael persisted, clearly not taking the hint. You deserve to celebrate. What you accomplished in that OR was extraordinary. I appreciate the invitation, Daphne said diplomatically, but I'm not ready to. She's not interested, Gabriel interrupted, his tone sharp enough to make both doctors turn to stare at him. Gabriel, Daphne said warningly. I'm sorry. Was I interrupting something? Michael asked with barely concealed irritation. I wasn't aware. Mr. Thorne had any say in Dr. Moore's personal life. The challenge in Michael's tone made Gabriel's hands clench into fists. When it comes to my family's well-being, I have plenty to say. Your family? Michael laughed harshly. From what I understand, Dr. Moore isn't part of your family anymore. Hasn't been for years. Gabriel stepped forward, every protective instinct firing. You don't know anything about my family or what Daphne means to us. Stop it, Daphne said sharply, moving between them. Both of you. There's a sick child in this room who doesn't need to see the adults in her life acting like children themselves. Both men had the grace to look ashamed, but the tension between them remained thick enough to cut. Michael, thank you for the invitation, but my answer is no, Daphne said firmly. My focus right now is Amy's recovery. Michael nodded stiffly, clearly understanding that he'd been dismissed. Of course, if you change your mind. After Michael left, Gabriel and Daphne stood in awkward silence until Amy's small voice broke the tension. Daddy, why were you mad at that man? Gabriel ran his hands through his hair, trying to find an age-appropriate answer. I wasn't mad, Princess. I was just protective. Amy considered this seriously. Like when you got mad at Tommy Morrison for pulling my hair at school. Something like that, Gabriel agreed. Amy turned to Daphne with curious eyes. Did that man want to take you away from us? No, sweetheart, Daphne said quickly. No one is taking anyone anywhere. I'm right here and I'm not going anywhere while you're recovering. Good, Amy said with satisfaction. I don't want anyone else trying to be my mommy. I already have the best one. The innocent declaration hit Daphne like a lightning bolt. Amy still considered her to be her mother, despite 3 years of separation. The love hadn't dimmed or transferred to someone else. It had remained constant and pure. Gabriel saw the emotion on Daphne's face and felt his heart clench. This was what he destroyed with his fear and pride. This perfect, uncomplicated love that should have been the foundation of their family. That afternoon, as Amy napped, Gabriel and Daphne found themselves alone in the family lounge. The tension from the morning's confrontation still simmered between them. You had no right to speak for me with Michael, Daphne said quietly. You're right, Gabriel admitted. I'm sorry. The thought of you with someone else. What? Daphne challenged. What gives you the right to feel that way? You divorced me, remember? You chose your empire over our family. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city he'd helped build. I know what I chose, he said finally, and I know what it cost me, but that doesn't mean I can just turn off 5 years of loving you. 5 years? Daphne asked softly. Gabriel turned to face her, his gray eyes intense with emotion. I never stopped, Daphne. Not for a single day. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but the thought of another man touching you, making you laugh, having what I threw away, it's killing me. Before Daphne could respond, Amy appeared in the doorway, looking small in her hospital gown but determined. What are you doing out of bed, sweetheart? Daphne asked, immediately moving to Amy's side. I heard you talking, Amy said, looking between both adults. You sounded sad. Gabriel knelt down to Amy's level. We're not sad, Princess. We're just having a grown-up conversation. Amy studied both their faces with the uncanny intuition that children possess. Are you talking about whether Mommy Daph is going to stay with us? The directness of the question left both adults speechless. Because if you are, Amy continued matter-of-factly, I think you should know that I prayed every night for 3 years that she'd come back. And now she's here, and my heart is fixed, so maybe God thinks we should be a family again too. The simple faith in Amy's words was devastating. This 8-year-old child had maintained hope and love when the adults had given up, had believed in the possibility of restoration, when they'd accepted brokenness as permanent. Amy, Daphne said gently, sitting down so she was eye level with the little girl. Sometimes things can't go back to exactly the way they were before. But they could be different and still good, Amy said wisely, like my heart. It's different now after the surgery, but it's better than it was before. Gabriel felt his breath catch at Amy's unexpected wisdom. Maybe she was right. Maybe they couldn't go back to what they'd been, but perhaps they could build something new and stronger from the pieces of what they'd broken. Why don't we get you back to bed? Daphne said, taking Amy's hand. You need to rest so you can keep getting stronger. As they walked back to Amy's room, Amy between them holding both their hands, Gabriel caught Daphne's eye over their daughter's head. The look they shared was complex, filled with love, fear, hope, and the terrifying possibility of second chances. That evening, as Amy slept peacefully, Gabriel found Daphne in the family lounge, reviewing Amy's post-surgical care plans. She looked up when he entered, and he saw exhaustion mixed with something that looked like longing in her dark eyes. She's doing beautifully, Gabriel said, settling into the chair across from her. Thanks to you. She's a fighter, Daphne replied. She gets that from both of us. The acknowledgement that Amy was theirs, both of theirs, hung in the air between them. Gabriel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly. I've been thinking about what Amy said, he began, about hearts being different after surgery but better than before. Daphne set down her medical charts, giving him her full attention. Maybe she's right, Gabriel continued. Maybe we can't go back to who we were 5 years ago. But maybe we could become something better, something stronger. Gabriel, Daphne said softly, but he held up a hand. Let me say this, please. I've had 5 years to think about what I did wrong, about how I failed you and Amy. I was terrified of abandonment because everyone I'd ever loved had left me. My parents, the foster families who sent me back, everyone. But instead of fighting for what we had, I pushed you away because I thought it would hurt less if I did it first. Tears were flowing down Daphne's cheeks, but she didn't interrupt. I was wrong about everything, Gabriel said, his voice breaking. It hurt more, not less. And I didn't just lose you. I lost the best part of myself, the part that you and Amy brought out in me. You hurt me so badly, Daphne whispered. I felt like I was married to a stranger who disappeared into work every time things got difficult between us. I know, Gabriel said, reaching across the small table to take her hand. When she didn't pull away, hope bloomed in his chest. I know I hurt you. I know I have to earn your trust again. But Daphne, I'm not the same man who was too scared to fight for his family. Losing you taught me what really matters. Daphne looked down at their joined hands, Gabriel's thumb stroking gently across her knuckles, in a gesture that was achingly familiar. Amy deserves better than broken parents, she said quietly. She deserves parents who love each other and aren't afraid to show it, Gabriel countered. She deserves a family that doesn't give up when things get hard. Before Daphne could respond, they heard Amy calling from her room. Both parents immediately went to her, finding her awake and reaching for them. I had the best dream, Amy said sleepily as they settled on either side of her bed. We were at home, and Mommy Daph was making pancakes, and Daddy wasn't on his phone for work. We were just together. Gabriel and Daphne exchanged a look over Amy's head. The dream sounded so simple, so attainable, yet so impossible given their history. That sounds like a wonderful dream, Daphne said, smoothing Amy's hair. It wasn't just a dream, Amy said with 8-year-old certainty. It was like seeing what could happen if you both stopped being scared and just love each other like you used to. The wisdom from their small daughter was humbling. Here was a child who'd faced heart surgery with more courage than 2 adults could muster to face their own emotional healing. As Amy drifted back to sleep, Gabriel and Daphne remained beside her bed, both lost in thought. The possibility of restoration hung between them, fragile and precious as Amy's healing heart. I'm scared, Daphne admitted quietly. So am I, Gabriel replied. But maybe Amy's right. Maybe being scared isn't a reason not to try. Daphne looked at him across Amy's sleeping form, seeing not the man who'd hurt her, but the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The man who'd been brave enough to build an empire from nothing, but was too afraid to believe in forever love. If we did this, she said carefully, if we tried again, things would have to be different. Everything would be different, Gabriel promised, starting with me. The conversation was interrupted by Sophia Morgan appearing in the doorway with Amy's discharge papers. Amy was being released the next day, ahead of schedule thanks to her remarkable recovery. As they discussed Amy's home care instructions, Gabriel made a decision that surprised even himself. "I want to take a leave of absence from the company," he announced, "until Amy is fully recovered." Both women stared at him in shock. Gabriel Thorne didn't take vacations, let alone leaves of absence. "Gabriel, that's not necessary," Daphne protested. "I can manage her care." "I know you can," Gabriel said, "but I want to be there. I want to be the father I should have been before, the husband I should have been." The word husband slipped out before he could stop it, hanging in the air between them. Daphne's breath caught, but she didn't correct him. "Besides," Gabriel continued, trying to lighten the moment, "someone needs to make sure Amy doesn't convince you to let her eat ice cream for every meal." Despite everything, Daphne smiled. "She does have very persuasive arguments when it comes to ice cream." "She gets that from you," Gabriel said, his eyes warm with memories of happier times. As they made plans for Amy's homecoming, both Gabriel and Daphne felt something shifting between them. Not the desperate passion of their youth, but something deeper, a mature love tempered by loss and strengthened by shared purpose. They were no longer the young couple who'd married in a whirlwind of attraction and dreams. They were two people who'd been broken apart and scarred by their failures, but who shared the most important thing in the world, their love for Amy. Whether that love could be the foundation for rebuilding what they'd lost remained to be seen. But for the first time in 5 years, both of them were willing to find out. Chapter 3. The morning of Amy's discharge, Gabriel arrived at the hospital to find Daphne already there, helping Amy get dressed in the new clothes he'd brought from home. The domestic scene hit him with unexpected force. This was what he'd dreamed of during 5 lonely years, what he'd convinced himself he could never have again. "Daddy!" Amy called excitedly. "Mommy Daph said I can have a real bath at home instead of these hospital wipe things." "A bath sounds perfect, Princess," Gabriel said, his eyes meeting Daphne's over Amy's head. The intimacy of the moment, discussing bath time like any normal family, felt both natural and miraculous. As they prepared to leave, Amy insisted on walking out under her own power, though she held both Gabriel's and Daphne's hands for support. The symbolism wasn't lost on either adult, Amy literally holding them together as they left the hospital where so much healing had happened. "Where are we going?" Amy asked as they settled into Gabriel's car. Gabriel and Daphne exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed the logistics of Amy's recovery, where Daphne would stay, how they'd manage the delicate dance of co-parenting while navigating their own complicated feelings. "Home," Gabriel said simply. "We're going home." The penthouse looked exactly as Daphne remembered, but somehow smaller. The soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that had once impressed her now seemed less important than the family photos scattered throughout, pictures of happier times when they'd all been together. Amy immediately headed for her room, eager to see her toys and books after a week in the hospital. Gabriel and Daphne stood awkwardly in the living room, suddenly unsure how to navigate this new territory. "I can get a hotel," Daphne said quietly. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Gabriel said immediately. This was your home too. Amy needs you here, and honestly, so do I. I don't know the first thing about post-surgical care." Before Daphne could respond, Amy reappeared with an armful of stuffed animals. "Look, Mommy Daph, they're all still here just like you left them." Amy's innocent words hit both adults like a punch. Of course, Gabriel had kept Daphne's things in Amy's room. He'd been hoping she'd come back someday too. "They missed you," Amy continued matter-of-factly. "Especially Mr. Buttons. He was very sad when you left." Daphne picked up the worn teddy bear she'd bought for Amy's first birthday, the one that had been Amy's constant companion during those early years. The bear still smelled faintly of the lavender fabric softener she used to use. "I missed him too," Daphne said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Gabriel watched this reunion between Daphne and Amy's childhood treasures, seeing how naturally she fell back into the maternal role she'd been forced to abandon. This was where she belonged, he realized, not just in Amy's life, but in this home, in their family. The first few, Days fell into a surprisingly natural rhythm. Gabriel had indeed taken a leave of absence from his company, shocking everyone who knew him. He was determined to be present in a way he'd never been before, to prove to both Daphne and Amy that they were his priority. Mornings began with breakfast together, Gabriel learning to make Amy's favorite pancakes while Daphne managed Amy's medications. Afternoons were quiet recovery time, with Amy resting while Gabriel worked from home and Daphne caught up on her other patients via telemedicine. Evenings were family time, reading stories, playing quiet games, talking about Amy's future now that her heart was working properly. The domesticity of it was both comforting and terrifying for two people who'd lost faith in forever. On the fourth day, as they sat together on the couch watching Amy's favorite movie, Amy fell asleep between them. Gabriel carefully lifted her to carry her to bed, and Daphne followed to help tuck her in. Standing in Amy's doorway, watching her sleep peacefully, Gabriel felt overwhelmed by gratitude. "She looks so healthy," he said quietly. "I can't believe the difference the surgery made." "She's going to have a completely normal life now," Daphne assured him. "No restrictions, no limitations. She can run and play and do everything other children do." "Because of you," Gabriel said, turning to face her in the dim hallway. "Because you saved her." "We saved her," Daphne corrected. "You brought her to me, trusted me with her life. We did this together." The word "together" hung between them, loaded with possibility. They were standing close enough that Gabriel could see the flecks of gold in Daphne's dark eyes, could smell the familiar scent of her perfume. "Daphne," he said softly, reaching up to touch her cheek. But before he could finish the thought, Daphne stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should check my emails," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Make sure none of my other patients need anything." Gabriel nodded, understanding her need for distance even as it frustrated him. They were living in an emotional bubble, playing house while Amy recovered, but eventually they'd have to face reality. Eventually, they'd have to decide what came next. The decision was forced on them sooner than expected. A week after Amy's discharge, Dr. Patricia Coleman called with news that changed everything. "I've been offered the position of Chief of Pediatric Cardiology at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia," Daphne announced after hanging up the phone. "It's an incredible opportunity. Triple the salary, my own research funding, the chance to build a program from the ground up." Gabriel felt the color drain from his face. Philadelphia might as well be on the other side of the world. "When would you start?" "They want an answer by Friday. I'd start in 6 weeks." Amy, who'd been coloring at the kitchen table, looked up with wide eyes. "You're leaving again?" The pain in Amy's voice was devastating. Daphne immediately knelt beside her chair, taking Amy's small hands in hers. "It's just a job opportunity, sweetheart. Nothing's decided yet." "But you said you wouldn't leave while I was getting better," Amy protested, tears gathering in her eyes. "You promised." Gabriel saw Daphne's face crumple with guilt and knew she was trapped between her professional ambitions and the family she'd come to love again. "Amy, let's go watch cartoons," Gabriel said gently, recognizing that Daphne needed space to think. "Mommy Daph needs some quiet time to consider this job." After Amy was settled in the living room, Gabriel found Daphne standing on the terrace, staring out at the city skyline. "It's a great opportunity," he said, joining her at the railing. "It is," she agreed, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. "But," Daphne was quiet for a long moment, "but it would mean leaving Amy again, leaving you. And I don't know if I can do that twice." Gabriel's heart clenched at the admission. "What if you didn't have to choose?" Daphne turned to look at him, confusion clear in her eyes. "What if you took the job?" Gabriel said carefully. "And Amy and I moved to Philadelphia with you?" The suggestion hung in the air between them, radical and terrifying and full of possibility. "Gabriel, you can't just uproot your entire business." "I can do anything I want," Gabriel interrupted. "I built one company from nothing. I can build another one or expand this one or sell it entirely. None of that matters without you and Amy." "That's exactly what you said before," Daphne said, her voice tight with old pain. "You promised me your company wouldn't come between us, but it always did." Gabriel was quiet, knowing she was right. He'd made similar promises before and broken them. "You're right," he said finally. "I did promise that before, and I failed. But I'm not the same man I was then. Losing you taught me what really matters." "Pretty words," Daphne said, but her tone wasn't entirely dismissive. "Then let me prove it with actions," Gabriel said, turning to face her fully. "I'll sell the company, all of it. I'll liquidate everything and we'll start fresh in Philadelphia. Just us, building a life together without the ghosts of my past mistakes." Daphne stared at him in shock. Gabriel's technology company was his life's work, worth billions of dollars, employing thousands of people. The idea of him selling it for her and Amy was almost incomprehensible. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," Gabriel said, stepping closer. "Daphne, I love you. I never stopped loving you, and I know now that I never will. If you'll give us another chance, I'll prove every day that you and Amy are more important than any business, any success, anything else in this world." Before Daphne could respond, Amy's voice came from the doorway. "Are you talking about whether we're going to be a family again?" Both adults turned to find Amy, watching them with that uncanny intuition that children possess. How long had she been listening? "Amy, sweetheart," Daphne started. "Because if you are," Amy interrupted with 8-year-old directness, "I think you should know that I don't care if we live here or in Philadelphia or on the moon. I just want us to be together." The simple wisdom of a child cut through all their adult complications. Amy didn't care about job opportunities or business empires or past mistakes. She just wanted her family whole again. Gabriel knelt down to Amy's level. "What if Daddy sold his company and we all moved to Philadelphia so Mommy Daph could take her new job?" Amy's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? We'd all live together like a real family?" "Like a real family," Gabriel confirmed, his eyes finding Daphne's over Amy's head. Amy launched herself at Gabriel, hugging him tightly. "That would be the best thing ever." Over Amy's head, Gabriel looked at Daphne with an expression of complete vulnerability. He was offering her everything: his business, his life in New York, his willingness to start over completely. All he was asking for in return was a chance to rebuild their family. "I need time to think," Daphne said quietly. Gabriel nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. But know this, whether you take the job in Philadelphia or not, whether you give us another chance or not, I'm done putting anything ahead of you and Amy. I'm done being the man who was too afraid to fight for what mattered most." That night, as Amy slept peacefully in her own bed for the first time in weeks, Gabriel found himself standing outside the guest room where Daphne was staying. He could see light under the door, knew she was awake, probably struggling with the same thoughts that were keeping him up. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it again. She'd asked for time to think, and he needed to respect that. But the waiting was torture when everything he wanted was so close he could almost touch it. Inside the guest room, Daphne stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. The job offer in Philadelphia was everything she'd worked toward professionally. The chance to lead her own department, to conduct groundbreaking research, to save even more children like Amy. But Gabriel's offer to sell his company and start over was staggering in its implications. It would prove, more than any words could, that he'd truly changed his priorities, that she and Amy really did come first. The question was whether she could trust him not to resent her for it later, whether she could believe that this time would be different. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and she was surprised to see it was from Jeremy Evans. "I know it's not my place," the message read, "but I've watched Gabriel for the past 5 years. He's been a shell of himself without you and Amy. I've never seen him happier than he's been this past week. Don't let my bad advice 5 years ago keep you from the family. You all deserve." The unexpected support from the man who'd once encouraged their divorce was startling. If Jeremy Evans, Gabriel's business partner and oldest friend, believed Gabriel had truly changed, maybe she should take that seriously. The next morning brought another surprise. Daphne woke to find Gabriel in the kitchen making breakfast, but he wasn't alone. Jeremy Evans sat at the breakfast bar, looking uncharacteristically serious. "I hope you don't mind," Gabriel said, noticing Daphne's surprise. "Jeremy asked to speak with both of us." Amy was still sleeping, so the three adults had privacy to talk. Jeremy looked between Gabriel and Daphne, then took a deep breath. "I owe you both an apology," he began. 5 years ago, I encouraged Gabriel to prioritize the business over your marriage. I told him you were holding him back from his full potential. Daphne felt old anger flare up. "You did what?" "I was jealous," Jeremy admitted. "Not romantically," he added quickly. "But Gabriel had everything. A brilliant wife who loved him, a daughter who adored him, a successful business. I had none of that. So I convinced him that emotional attachments were weaknesses that successful men couldn't afford." Gabriel's jaw was tight with controlled emotion. "Jeremy." "Let me finish," Jeremy interrupted. "I've spent 5 years watching you be miserable, Gabriel. Watching you throw yourself into work not because you loved it, but because it was the only thing that distracted you from what you'd lost. I watched you become everything I thought a successful man should be, and I realized I'd been completely wrong." He turned to Daphne. "I destroyed your marriage with my poison advice. Gabriel made the choice to listen to me, but I planted the seeds. I've regretted it every day since." Daphne stared at Jeremy, processing this revelation. She'd always sensed that Gabriel's business partner had disapproved of their marriage, but she'd never realized he'd actively worked to undermine it. "Why are you telling us this now?" she asked. Jeremy smiled sadly. "Because I've seen Gabriel this past week. He's alive again in a way he hasn't been in years. And because I've seen you with Amy, you three are a family, whether you're legally married or not. Don't let my mistakes 5 years ago keep you from having what you all deserve now." After Jeremy left, Gabriel and Daphne sat in silence, both processing the morning's revelations. "I should have trusted my instincts about him," Gabriel said finally. "I should have trusted you instead of listening to someone who didn't understand what we had." "Why did you listen to him?" Daphne asked quietly. "Why was his opinion more important than mine?" Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "Because he was telling me what I was afraid was true, that I wasn't good enough for you. That eventually you'd realize you deserved better and leave me anyway." The admission broke Daphne's heart. All this time, she'd thought Gabriel had chosen his business over their family because he loved success more than love itself. She'd never realized he'd been acting from a place of deep insecurity and fear of abandonment. "You were good enough," she said softly. "You were everything I wanted, but you wouldn't let me prove that to you." "I know," Gabriel said, looking up to meet her eyes. "I know that now. It took losing you to realize that pushing you away didn't protect me from pain. It guaranteed it." Amy chose that moment to wander into the kitchen, still in her pajamas and rubbing sleepy eyes. "Are you having another grown-up talk?" she asked, climbing into Gabriel's lap. "Something like that," Gabriel said, wrapping his arms around his daughter. "How are you feeling this morning, Princess?" "Good," Amy said, then looked between both adults with that too perceptive expression they'd come to know well. "But you both look sad. Are you fighting again?" "We're not fighting," Daphne assured her. "We're just talking about important things." "Like whether we're going to be a family?" Amy asked hopefully. Gabriel and Daphne exchanged a look over Amy's head. Their daughter's single-minded focus on family reunion was both touching and heartbreaking. "Amy," Daphne said carefully, "what would you think if Daddy and I got married again?" Amy's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You'd be married again and we'd live together forever?" "If that's what we all decided we wanted," Daphne said, her heart pounding at her own boldness and even suggesting it. Amy looked between both adults seriously. "I think you should," she said with 8-year-old authority, "because you love each other and I love both of you, and that's what families do." "What about living in Philadelphia?" Gabriel asked. "Would you be okay with moving to a new city?" Amy considered this thoughtfully. "Would we all go together?" "All of us together," Gabriel confirmed. "Then yes," Amy said decisively. "Home is wherever we're all together." The simple wisdom of their 8-year-old daughter put everything into perspective. Home wasn't a place. It was being together as a family. That afternoon, while Amy napped, Gabriel found Daphne in his study, staring at his wall of awards and business achievements. Impressive collection, she said without turning around. Dust collectors, Gabriel replied, joining her. None of it means anything without the people I love to share it with. Daphne picked up a photo from his desk, the Christmas morning picture Amy had mentioned, showing all three of them opening presents together during happier times. You really kept this on your desk all these years? Every day, Gabriel confirmed. Jeremy used to tell me I should take it down, that it was unprofessional. But I couldn't. It reminded me of what I was working toward getting back. Daphne traced the glass over their smiling faces with her finger. They looked so young, so hopeful, so certain that love would be enough to overcome anything. We're older now, she said quietly. We know more about how badly things can go wrong. We also know more about what we're willing to fight for, Gabriel countered, about what really matters. Gabriel moved to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not quite touching her. Daphne, I know I'm asking you to take an enormous leap of faith. I know I've given you every reason not to trust me with your heart again. But I swear to you, on Amy's life, on everything I hold sacred, I will never again choose anything over our family. Daphne turned in his arms, finding herself face to face with the man she'd never stopped loving despite all the pain between them. His gray eyes were intense with sincerity, with hope, with a love that had survived 5 years of separation. If we do this, she said quietly, if we try again, I need to know you understand what you're asking me to risk. I barely survived losing you and Amy once. I won't survive it a second time. You won't have to, Gabriel said, reaching up to cup her face in his hands, because I'm never letting you go again. I'm never going to be stupid enough to push away the best thing that ever happened to me. The sincerity in his voice, the tenderness in his touch, broke down the last of Daphne's defenses. This was the Gabriel she'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, honest, willing to lay his heart bare for love. I want to believe you, she whispered. Then believe this, Gabriel said, leaning down until his forehead rested against hers. I love you, Daphne Moore. I've loved you since the day we met. I loved you through our marriage. I loved you through our divorce. And I'll love you until the day I die. Give us another chance, and I'll spend every day proving that love is stronger than fear. Before Daphne could respond, Gabriel's phone buzzed with an urgent text. He started to ignore it, but Daphne pulled back, the spell broken. Take it, she said. It might be important. Gabriel glanced at the phone, then at Daphne. It's the board of directors. There's some crisis with the Tokyo expansion. Old patterns would have had Gabriel immediately calling back, dropping everything for business, but instead, he turned off the phone and set it aside. Let them handle it, he said. Or wait until tomorrow. Right now, the only crisis I care about is whether I'm going to get a second chance with the woman I love. The gesture was small, but significant. The old Gabriel would have taken the call, would have apologized, but insisted the business couldn't wait. This Gabriel was choosing love over commerce, family over empire. You really have changed, Daphne said wonderingly. Losing you changed me, Gabriel said simply. It taught me what really matters. It taught me that all the success in the world means nothing if you don't have love to share it with. Gabriel took Daphne's hands in his thumbs stroking over her knuckles in the gesture that had always been uniquely theirs. Marry me again, he said quietly. Marry me and take the job in Philadelphia. Let me sell the company and prove that you and Amy are my greatest achievements. Let us be a family again. Daphne looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd once dreamed of. Love, commitment, a future where she came first. But she also saw the scars they'd both carry from their first attempt, the knowledge of how quickly love could turn to pain. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Gabriel said. But I'm more scared of living without you than I am of trying again. Before Daphne could respond, Amy's voice came from the doorway. Are you going to kiss her, Daddy? Both adults turned to find Amy watching them with bright, hopeful eyes. I don't know, Gabriel said, his eyes never leaving Daphne's face. What do you think, Mommy Daph? Should Daddy kiss you? The use of Amy's childhood name for her, the way Gabriel was letting their daughter witness this moment of decision, the complete vulnerability in his expression, it all combined to shatter the last of Daphne's resistance. Yes, she whispered. I think he should. Gabriel's smile was radiant as he leaned down to capture her lips in a kiss that was tender, passionate, and full of 5 years' worth of longing. Daphne melted into him, her arms coming up to wind around his neck, her body remembering exactly how perfectly she fit against him. When they finally broke apart, Amy was clapping with delight. Does this mean we're going to be a real family again? Amy asked hopefully. Gabriel and Daphne looked at each other, both seeing their future reflected in the other's eyes. Yes, Princess, Gabriel said, never taking his eyes off Daphne's face. We're going to be a real family again. Amy launched herself at both of them, creating a group hug that felt like coming home after a long, painful journey. Later that evening, after Amy had fallen asleep between them during movie night, Gabriel and Daphne found themselves alone on the terrace under the stars. I called Dr. Coleman, Daphne said quietly. I accepted the position in Philadelphia. Gabriel's smile was brilliant. And I called my lawyers. The company will be on the market by the end of the week. Gabriel, are you sure? It's your life's work. No, Gabriel interrupted, pulling her closer. You and Amy are my life's work. Everything else is just business. As if to prove his point, Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I've been carrying this around for 5 years, he admitted, opening the box to reveal Daphne's original engagement ring, a classic solitaire that he'd chosen not for its size but for its perfection, its ability to catch and reflect light from every angle. You kept it, Daphne breathed. I kept everything, Gabriel said. Your clothes are still in our closet. Your coffee mug is still in the kitchen cabinet. Your books are still on the nightstand. I kept it all because some part of me always believed you'd come home someday. Tears were streaming down Daphne's face as Gabriel took her left hand. Daphne Moore, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you give us the second chance we both deserve? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love really can conquer all? Through her tears, Daphne saw not just the man who'd hurt her, but the man who'd learned from his mistakes. She saw not just the broken pieces of their past, but the beautiful future they could build together. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. As Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit after all these years, Daphne felt something settle into place in her chest. Not just love, but peace. The certainty that this time, they'd get it right. Their kiss was interrupted by a sleepy voice from inside. Mommy Daph? Daddy? Where are you? Hand in hand and wearing matching smiles and hearts full of hope, Gabriel and Daphne went inside to comfort their daughter and begin planning their future as a family reunited. 6 months later, in a small ceremony in Philadelphia with Amy as their flower girl, Gabriel Thorne and Dr. Daphne Moore were married for the second time. But this wasn't just a repetition of their first wedding. This was a celebration of second chances, of love that had survived loss and grown stronger for it. As they danced at their reception, Amy dancing between them just as she'd dreamed, all three of them knew they'd found something rare and precious, a love worth fighting for, a family worth rebuilding, and the courage to believe in forever one more time. Sometimes the greatest surgery isn't performed on the heart in your chest, but on the heart in your soul. Have you ever gotten a second chance at something precious you thought you'd lost forever? Share your story of second chances in the comments. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart, and subscribe for tomorrow's tale of love conquering all. You are worthy of love that never gives up. Remember that always.